I'm Natalie Thompson, 29, standing on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean in New Zealand, scrolling through viral photos of my sister's wedding back in Boston. 6 months ago, my parents suggested I skip the ceremony entirely. Their exact words, "It's better if you're not there." So I disappeared completely. Now I have a thriving research career, new friends, and peace of mind, while they're frantically searching for the daughter they erased. Turns out, sometimes you have to become invisible to those who never truly saw you anyway. What they didn't expect were the consequences of my vanishing act. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about reclaiming your power from toxic family dynamics. Growing up as the older sister to Ashley was an exercise in invisibility training. From the beginning, it was clear who held the spotlight in the Thompson family. While Ashley, now 25, commanded attention with her vivacious personality and golden curls, I was the responsible, academically driven daughter who kept to the background. Our parents, Diana and James Thompson, never tried to hide their favoritism. When I was 8 and won my first science fair, they skipped the ceremony because Ashley had a dance recital the same day. "There will be other science fairs," my mother said, patting my head distractedly while fixing Ashley's tutu. That became the theme of my childhood. My accomplishments were footnotes, Ashley's were headlines. Family photo albums told the story better than words ever could. Ashley's solo photos dominated each page, while I appeared mostly in group shots, often partially cropped out. For her 10th birthday, my parents rented a pony. For mine, I received a practical set of encyclopedias and a reminder that big girls don't need parties. As I entered high school, I channeled my emotional isolation into academic excellence. I graduated as valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to Stanford for undergrad, and eventually completed my PhD in medical research, specializing in autoimmune disorders. My career was flourishing, with published papers and speaking engagements at international conferences. Meanwhile, Ashley bounced between liberal arts colleges, changing majors 3 times before settling on communications, which our parents funded entirely despite her mediocre grades. "Natalie has always been so independent," my mother would tell relatives, recasting their emotional neglect as a virtue on my part. "Ashley needs more guidance." This narrative persisted into our adult years, with my parents constantly bailing Ashley out of financial troubles while expecting me to navigate life without support. My best friend Zoe Mitchell was the only person who truly understood the painful dynamics of my family. We met in graduate school, and she witnessed firsthand how my parents would cancel planned visits when Ashley had even minor crises. "Your family doesn't deserve you," she would say, outrage coloring her voice after particularly hurtful incidents. "They're still my family," I would respond, though each dismissal chipped away at my loyalty. The most recent deterioration in our relationship occurred after I made a significant breakthrough in my research on a treatment protocol for lupus. My paper was published in a prestigious medical journal, and I called home, excited to share the news. "That's nice, honey," my mother said distractedly. "Did you hear Ashley got promoted to social media coordinator at her company? They're even giving her a parking space now." That evening, I sat in my Boston apartment, staring at the congratulatory emails from colleagues around the world while my own parents couldn't muster genuine enthusiasm for what was arguably the pinnacle of my career thus far. Still, I continued making efforts. I called weekly, remembered birthdays and anniversaries, and visited during holidays, maintaining the appearance of family harmony despite the emotional neglect that had become so familiar it almost felt normal. I had built a life I was proud of, a renovated condo in Cambridge, respect in my field, close friendships with colleagues. Yet there remained a hollow space where family validation should have been, a void I continued trying to fill despite knowing, deep down, that nothing I achieved would ever be enough to shift the family spotlight. "You know," Zoe said during one of our weekly dinners, after I recounted another dismissive phone call with my mother, "at some point, you have to ask yourself why you keep going back to drink from a well that's always dry." I didn't have an answer then. But events over the next few months would force me to confront that question head-on, with consequences none of us could have anticipated. The call came on a Tuesday evening as I was reviewing lab results in my office. Ashley's breathless voice burst through the speaker. "I'm engaged. Ethan proposed last night." I immediately offered my congratulations, genuinely happy for my sister despite our complicated relationship. Ethan Reynolds seemed nice enough during our brief meetings, the son of a wealthy Boston family with political connections. He worked at his father's investment firm and clearly adored Ashley. "Mom and Dad are freaking out," she continued, barely pausing for breath. "They're already talking about booking the Fairmont for the reception. You have to come over for dinner Friday to celebrate." That Friday, I arrived at my parents' suburban home with an expensive bottle of champagne and a genuine desire to celebrate my sister's happiness. I'd even rescheduled an important conference call to make it on time. The moment I walked through the door, I was engulfed in wedding talk. Ashley was showing off her enormous diamond ring while my mother flipped through bridal magazines she'd apparently purchased the moment after hearing the news. My father was on the phone discussing potential venues with someone. "Natalie." Ashley squealed when she saw me, rushing over for a quick hug before immediately returning to her magazine. "What do you think of a June wedding?" "Too soon?" "June?" I asked, calculating quickly. "That's only 4 months away. Is that enough time to plan everything?" My mother looked up, frowning slightly. "Well, we can't wait too long. The Fairmont has an opening on June 12th, and the Reynolds know the manager. It's perfect timing." Throughout dinner, I tried several times to participate in the conversation, offering suggestions or asking questions, but each attempt was quickly redirected. When I mentioned a colleague's recent wedding that had beautiful personal touches, my mother cut me off. "Honey, this isn't going to be some academic's backyard wedding. This is going to be the event of the season." I fell silent, picking at my food while the three of them continued planning as if I wasn't there. As dessert was served, my father finally addressed me directly. "Natalie, we're going to need to discuss finances. This wedding is going to be substantial." "Oh?" I replied, confused about why my finances would be relevant to Ashley's wedding. "Well, we've had to dip into some investments. Including your college fund." I nearly choked on my coffee. "My college fund? But I didn't use it because I had scholarships. You promised that money would be there for a down payment when I was ready to buy property." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "You already have your condo. Ashley needs this money now for her special day." "But that was almost $50,000, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "And I only bought my condo because you said that fund would be available for renovations or future investments." My father's expression hardened. "You're being selfish, Natalie. You've always been financially stable. Your sister needs our support right now. It's always about you and your accomplishments," my mother added with a sigh. "Can't you just be happy for your sister without making everything about yourself?" I sat there, speechless, as they turned the situation completely around. The money that had been promised to me, funds my parents had insisted I not touch during college despite my scholarships, assuring me it would be there when I needed it for something important, was gone, redirected to fund an extravagant wedding that would last a single day. Later that week, I met Ashley for coffee, hoping to discuss the rushed timeline and perhaps suggest a more reasonable approach to wedding planning. "I'm just concerned 4 months isn't enough time to plan everything properly," I said carefully. "Most venues and vendors book up a year in advance." Ashley's expression immediately darkened. "Mom said you'd try to rain on my parade. You're just jealous because you're still single and focused on your boring lab work instead of having a real life." "That's not fair," I protested. "I'm trying to help make sure your day is perfect." "If you want to help, just stay out of the way," she snapped. "This is my moment, not another opportunity for you to show how smart and practical you are." I left the coffee shop feeling like I'd been slapped. When I called Zoe that evening to vent, her outrage matched my hurt. "They've always treated you like this," she fumed. "You give and give, and they take and take. When are you going to start standing up for yourself?" "They're my family," I said weakly, the response feeling more hollow than ever. No, Nat. They're people who share your DNA. There's a difference between family and relatives. Family doesn't treat you like you're disposable. I knew she was right, but years of conditioning had taught me to doubt my own feelings when they conflicted with my family's narrative. Still, something had shifted inside me, a crack in the foundation of my dutiful daughter persona that would only widen in the coming weeks. As April bloomed in Boston, I found myself increasingly sidelined in the whirlwind of wedding preparations. Despite my initial offer to help with planning, my assistance was either rejected or ignored entirely. The first major exclusion came when my mother called one evening, excitement bubbling in her voice. "We found the perfect dress for Ashley today. You should have seen her, she looked absolutely radiant." "You went dress shopping?" I asked, the hurt evident in my voice. "I thought we were going to do that together next weekend. We had plans." "Oh," my mother paused briefly. "Ashley was just so excited, and Boutique Elegance had a cancellation. It happened so quickly. You're always so busy with your research anyway." I swallowed my disappointment. "I understand. Can I see pictures at least?" "Ashley wants it to be a surprise for everyone," she replied quickly. "You know how brides are." The pattern continued. I wasn't invited to cake tastings, flower selections, or venue visits. Each time, there was a convenient excuse: last-minute appointments, my presumed busy schedule, or simply, we handled it. The truth became undeniable when my cousin Heather called to ask about bridesmaid dress fittings. "Wait, are you a bridesmaid?" I asked, confusion evident in my voice. "Yeah, all the cousins are." "Didn't Ashley tell you?" "We're getting fitted next Tuesday." The realization that my sister had asked our younger cousins, some of whom she barely spoke to outside of family gatherings, to be bridesmaids while excluding me felt like a physical blow. When I finally gathered the courage to ask Ashley about it, her response was casual cruelty. "I didn't think you'd want to deal with all the bridesmaid stuff," she said, not meeting my eyes. "You're always talking about how busy you are with your research. Besides, Cassandra is my maid of honor, and you two have never gotten along." Cassandra Williams had been Ashley's friend since high school, a woman who had made no secret of her dislike for me. Still, to be excluded entirely from the bridal party while distant relatives were included was a deliberate slight I couldn't ignore. "I would have made time," I said quietly. "I'm your sister." Ashley simply shrugged. "The wedding party is already set." Mom agreed it makes more sense this way. The bridesmaids' brunch at the Four Seasons confirmed my new status in the family hierarchy. Not only was I not in the wedding party, but I was seated at a far table with elderly relatives and acquaintances no one else wanted to deal with. I watched from a distance as Ashley, surrounded by her bridesmaids including our cousins, opened gifts and laughed. Cassandra made a point of stopping by my isolated table. "It's so nice that you could take time away from your test tubes to join us," she said with a saccharine smile. "Though I imagine it must be hard to be at these events when you're, still single at your age. Biological clock and all that." I maintained my composure, years of practice allowing me to smile politely even as I clenched my napkin under the table. "I'm quite fulfilled by my career, Cassandra. Not everyone measures success by marital status." "Of course," she replied with mock sincerity. "That's what all career women say until it's too late." That evening, I called the therapist I had started seeing months earlier when the family stress began affecting my sleep. "What I'm hearing," Dr. Marshall said after I recounted the brunch incident, "is a pattern of systematic exclusion. Your family has consistently marginalized your feelings and needs, and now they're physically positioning you as an outsider." "They don't mean to," I said automatically, the defensive response ingrained after years of making excuses for their behavior. "Don't they?" she asked gently. "Natalie, at what point do repeated actions reveal intention? If someone steps on your foot once, it's an accident. If they do it every day for years, it's a choice." Her words resonated uncomfortably. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that the pattern of exclusion might be deliberate rather than thoughtless. Meanwhile, my work was suffering. As one of the lead researchers on a promising new treatment protocol, I couldn't afford distractions, yet I found myself making uncharacteristic errors in the lab, missing details in reports, and struggling to focus during important meetings. "You look exhausted," my department head, Dr. Patel, commented after I fumbled through a presentation. "Is everything all right?" "Just some family stress," I admitted. "It will pass." He studied me for a moment before responding. "You know, there's a research opportunity that might interest you. A 6-month fellowship at the Auckland Institute in New Zealand, focusing on exactly your specialty area. They specifically asked if you might be available." "New Zealand?" I repeated, surprised. "That's halfway around the world." "Sometimes distance provides clarity," he said meaningfully. "The application deadline is next week. Just think about it." I tucked the information away, not seriously considering it at that point. My life was in Boston, my condo, my lab, my colleagues. Despite everything, I couldn't imagine being so far from my family, even as they continued pushing me further to the periphery of their lives. But as April turned to May, and the wedding preparations intensified while my exclusion became more pronounced, the fellowship information sat in my desk drawer like a lifeline I wasn't quite ready to grasp, yet couldn't bring myself to discard either. The Memorial Day weekend was supposed to be special. My father's 60th birthday coincided with the holiday, and months earlier, before Ashley's engagement, we had all agreed to spend the weekend at the family lake house in New Hampshire. I had requested the rare time off work weeks in advance, determined to make the celebration meaningful. I arrived Friday morning, carrying groceries, decorations, and a special gift I'd commissioned, a leather-bound photo book chronicling my father's life, with contributions from extended family members and old friends I'd spent months contacting secretly. I spent hours preparing his favorite foods, hanging birthday decorations, and arranging the lakeside deck for the small party I'd planned. By late afternoon, with no sign of my family and no responses to my texts, I began to worry. Finally, at nearly 6 o'clock, I heard cars pulling into the gravel driveway. I stepped onto the porch, ready to greet them with a smile despite my frustration at their lateness. My parents and Ashley tumbled out of one car, while Ethan and his parents emerged from another. They were laughing and talking excitedly, completely oblivious to my presence until I cleared my throat. "Oh, Natalie! You're already here," my mother exclaimed, sounding surprised despite our detailed plans. We lost track of time at the Reynolds Country Club. They were discussing wedding venue options and offered us a tour. I swallowed my disappointment. "I've been here since morning. I prepared dinner and decorated for Dad's birthday." My father glanced around, noticing the streamers and banner for the first time. "That's nice, honey. Let's get settled first. I'm sure the Reynolds would like to freshen up after the drive." The evening I had meticulously planned deteriorated quickly. The intimate family dinner I had prepared was deemed not enough for our guests, so my mother ordered delivery from an expensive restaurant instead. My decorations were deemed a bit childish by Mrs. Reynolds, and my mother quickly took them down. The carefully selected wine I'd brought was set aside in favor of champagne the Reynolds had brought to continue celebrating the engagement. My father's birthday became a footnote to more wedding discussions. When I finally managed to present the photo book, he flipped through it briefly before setting it aside when Ashley announced she wanted to discuss the rehearsal dinner menu. I retreated to the kitchen, fighting back tears as I cleaned up the meal I'd prepared that now sat largely untouched. Zoe's voice echoed in my head, "When are you going to start standing up for yourself?" I resolved to try once more to be heard. As everyone gathered on the deck after dinner, Ashley suddenly clapped her hands for attention. "We have an announcement. We've decided to move the wedding up to May 15th instead of June 12th. "But that's less than 3 weeks away," I said, surprised. The Reynolds Club had a cancellation, and it's perfect timing because their relatives from Europe will already be in town for another event, my mother explained excitedly. A cold realization washed over me. May 15th is the day of my research presentation at the International Immunology Conference. I'm the keynote speaker, I told everyone about this months ago. 6 faces turned to look at me with varying degrees of annoyance and dismissal. It's not like you're the one getting married, Natalie, Ashley said with an eye roll. Surely you can reschedule some work thing. Some work thing? I repeated incredulously. This is the most important presentation of my career. It could affect funding for our entire research program. People are flying in from around the world. My mother reached over to pat my hand condescendingly. Honey, this is your sister's wedding. Family comes first. When has family ever come first when it was something important to me? The words escaped before I could stop them, years of hurt finally breaking through. The deck fell silent. My father's expression darkened. That's uncalled for, Natalie. You've always been selfish about your career. Selfish? I stood up, shaking now. I rearranged my entire schedule to be here this weekend for your birthday. I spent months on your gift. I cooked all day. And none of you even noticed or cared. Here we go again, Ashley sighed dramatically. Natalie making everything about herself. Perhaps, Mrs. Reynolds said delicately, family dynamics can be discussed another time? We're here to celebrate a union. My mother nodded gratefully before turning to me with a tight smile. Mrs. Reynolds is right. This isn't the time, Natalie. In fact, given how you feel and your obvious resentment toward your sister's happiness, maybe it's better if you're not there at the wedding at all. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. I stared at her, waiting for someone, anyone, to object to such a cruel suggestion. Instead, my father nodded slowly. Diana's right. You've always made things about yourself, Natalie. Ashley deserves her day without your drama. I looked at my sister, waiting for her to defend me, to reject the idea of her only sister missing her wedding. Instead, she examined her manicure and said softly, it would make things less complicated. Something broke inside me at that moment, not with a dramatic shatter, but with the quiet finality of a thread pulled beyond its tensile strength. Without another word, I walked into the house, collected my purse and car keys, and drove away from the lake house. No one came after me. No one called to see if I was all right. I drove through the night back to Boston, tears blurring my vision until I had to pull over several times to collect myself. At 3 a.m., I called Zoe. They don't want me at the wedding, I said when she answered, my voice hollow. What? Who doesn't want you there? Zoe asked, instantly alert despite the hour. All of them. My parents, Ashley. They said it's better if I'm not there. I recounted the evening's events, each word painful to articulate. That's it, Zoe declared, fury evident in her voice. I've watched them hurt you for years, but this crosses every line. They don't deserve you, Nat. Not a single one of them. I sat in my parked car, watching the sunrise over the Boston skyline, and made a decision that would change everything. The Auckland Institute Fellowship, I said quietly. I'm going to apply. The New Zealand position? Zoe asked. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything, I replied, a strange calm replacing the storm of emotions. I need to get away, far away. When I returned to my apartment, I found the fellowship information and completed the online application, attaching my CV and research proposal with trembling fingers. As I clicked submit, a weight seemed to lift, a decision made that would set in motion a chain of events none of us could have anticipated. 3 days later, as I was mechanically going through motions in the lab, trying to focus despite the emotional turmoil, an email notification appeared on my phone. The Auckland Institute had reviewed my application on an expedited basis and was offering me the fellowship position, with a request for me to start as soon as possible due to the urgency of the research. It felt like a sign from the universe, an escape hatch appearing exactly when I needed it most. I stared at my phone screen for a long moment before typing a 2-word reply that would change the course of my life, I accept. Once the decision was made, I approached my disappearance with the same methodical precision I applied to my research. This wouldn't be an impulsive vanishing act but a carefully orchestrated exit from a life that had become increasingly painful. My first step was meeting with Dr. Patel to discuss the immediate transfer to Auckland. His expression showed concern but not surprise. "Are you certain about this timing, Natalie? Leaving so suddenly is quite unusual, even for an opportunity like this." I maintained my professional composure. "I've given it thorough consideration. The research alignment is perfect, and frankly, I could use a change of environment." He studied me for a moment before nodding. "Your contributions here have been exceptional. We'll support your decision, though you'll be greatly missed. I'll handle the transition paperwork personally." With my professional departure arranged, I turned to practical matters. My condo would need to be dealt with, selling it would create a paper trail and take too long. Instead, I contacted Lillian, a fellow researcher who had recently mentioned looking for a place. "I'm taking a research position overseas," I explained over coffee. "I need someone reliable to take over my condo. You'd pay market rate rent, but with an option to buy when I decide if I'm coming back." Lillian agreed enthusiastically, and we arranged for a lawyer to draw up the necessary documents. Next came financial preparations, setting up automatic payments for remaining obligations, establishing international banking access, and liquidating some investments for the move. Each task was checked off with quiet efficiency, a control I couldn't exert over my emotional life now channeled into these practical arrangements. The most difficult conversation was with Zoe. We met at our favorite restaurant, a small Italian place where the staff knew us by name. After ordering, I took a deep breath and laid out my complete plan. "I'm not just taking the fellowship, Zoe. I'm disappearing entirely." Her fork clattered against her plate. "What do you mean, disappearing?" "I mean no contact with family. New phone number. Closed social media accounts. A complete break." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. After what happened at the lake house, I realized something. They won't miss me, they'll miss the idea of me, the dutiful daughter they can dismiss and take for granted. I need to find out who I am without their shadows hanging over me. Zoe reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I understand the need for distance, but complete disappearance? They'll worry, Nat. Will they?" I asked quietly. "Or will they just be annoyed that I'm not available when they decide they need me again?" "This isn't impulsive, Zoe. This is self-preservation." Her expression shifted from concern to understanding. "What do you need from me?" "You're the only person I'm telling about this. I need someone who knows I'm safe, someone I can trust with my new contact information." I slid a sealed envelope across the table. "Inside is my new email address, one I've created specifically for communicating with you. No phone number yet, I'll get a New Zealand one when I arrive. Don't open it unless there's a genuine emergency." "Define emergency," she said, taking the envelope. "Life or death?" "Nothing less." I was firm on this point. "I need this clean break, Zoe. I need to know if they even notice I'm gone." She nodded slowly. "And what should I tell them when they ask me where you are?" "Tell them you don't know. It won't be a lie, you'll know I'm in New Zealand, but not where exactly." I managed a small smile. "Besides, I suspect it will be a while before they even realize I'm not around." My final attempt to connect with my family came that Sunday. I went to the weekly family dinner as if nothing had changed, curious to see if anyone would acknowledge the lake house incident. No one did. My mother talked about floral arrangements. My father discussed golf. Ashley showed photos of potential honeymoon locations. Not once did anyone ask about my research, my feelings about being uninvited from the wedding, or even basic questions about my life. I sat through the meal in a strange state of detachment, observing them as if through glass. These people shared my DNA but had never truly seen me. The realization was both painful and freeing, confirmation that my decision was the right one. That evening, I returned to my increasingly bare apartment and continued preparations. I sold my car to a dealership rather than privately to minimize questions. I packed 2 suitcases with only what truly mattered to me: favorite books, essential clothes, irreplaceable photos, and research materials. Everything else would stay in the condo for Lillian's use or be donated. The practicalities of disappearing in the digital age required careful attention. I deactivated rather than deleted social media accounts to avoid immediate concern. I set up an automated email response citing an extended research sabbatical with limited connectivity. I scheduled a final automated bank transfer to my parents' account to repay an old loan, timed to arrive after I would be gone. For Zoe, I left a detailed letter with my lawyer, to be delivered 1 week after my departure. It contained more specific information about my plans and the reassurance that I was safe, along with instructions not to reveal my whereabouts. "This isn't forever," I wrote at the end. "This is just until I find myself again, the self I've lost trying to be the daughter they wanted instead of the person I am." As my departure date approached, I felt a strange mix of terror and liberation. I was leaving behind everything familiar for complete uncertainty, yet the prospect filled me with more hope than I'd felt in years. My final night in Boston, I walked through the city streets until dawn, saying a private goodbye to the life I was leaving behind. The next morning, I boarded a plane to Auckland without looking back. No one from my family called to say goodbye because no one knew I was leaving. As the aircraft lifted into the clouds, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to acknowledge the truth that had been building for years: sometimes the only way to be seen is to disappear. The Auckland airport buzzed with activity as I collected my luggage, the reality of what I'd done finally sinking in. I was literally on the other side of the world from everything I'd known, starting completely fresh at 29 years old. Dr. Isabella Chen, the program coordinator who'd championed my application, greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome to New Zealand, Dr. Thompson. We're thrilled to have you join our team." The Auckland Institute for Medical Research occupied a sleek building overlooking the harbor. As Dr. Chen showed me around the state-of-the-art facilities, introducing me to my new colleagues, I felt a strange sensation I eventually recognized as relief. Here, no one knew me as Ashley's sister or the Thompsons' high-achieving daughter. I was simply Dr. Natalie Thompson, respected researcher. "Your work on targeted immunotherapy protocols is exactly what our program needed," Dr. Chen explained as we toured the lab that would become my second home. "We've allocated additional funding based on your research proposal. The team is eager to begin." My temporary housing, arranged by the Institute, was a furnished apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a breathtaking view of the Pacific Ocean. That first evening, I stood on the small balcony watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink, breathing deeper than I had in months. The first week passed in a blur of orientation meetings, lab setups, and adjustment to the new time zone. I threw myself into work, grateful for the mental engagement that kept me from dwelling on what I'd left behind. My colleagues were welcoming but respectful of my privacy, creating the perfect environment for my fresh start. By the second week, I'd established a routine: mornings in the lab, afternoons collaborating with researchers, evenings exploring my new city. Auckland's vibrant culture and stunning landscapes became a healing balm for my wounded spirit. On weekends, I ventured further afield, hiking coastal trails and discovering hidden beaches where I could sit for hours watching the waves, processing all that had happened. 3 weeks after my arrival, my phone pinged with an email notification from Zoe. My heart raced as I opened it. "They finally noticed," the subject line read. According to Zoe, my family had tried to reach me through increasingly frantic calls and texts, apparently wanting to discuss some wedding detail. When I didn't respond, my mother had called my department at the Boston lab, only to be informed that I had taken a research position overseas. This news, Zoe reported, had been met with indignation rather than concern. "Your mother called me," Zoe wrote. "She demanded to know where you were, saying you'd run off without a word and were ruining Ashley's wedding with your dramatics. I told her I didn't know your exact location, which is technically true. She didn't believe me. Your father called next, then Ashley. I stuck to our agreement. They're angry, Nat, not worried. At least not yet." I closed the email without responding, a mix of emotions swirling through me. part of me had hoped they would be immediately concerned by my absence, proving that they cared more than they'd shown. Instead, their first reaction was anger at the inconvenience my disappearance caused them. It was painful confirmation that I'd made the right decision. As days turned to weeks, I began building a new social circle. Dr. James Cooper, a British neurologist collaborating with our department, became a regular lunch companion. Unlike my colleagues in Boston who knew my family history, James had no preconceptions about me. Our conversations ranged from research methodologies to favorite films, untainted by the shadow of family dynamics. "You seem lighter today," he commented one afternoon as we walked along the harbor after work. "Do I?" I asked, surprised by his observation. "When you first arrived, there was a guardedness about you," he said carefully. "It's less pronounced now." "Auckland agrees with you." I smiled, realizing he was right. The constant tension I'd carried for years was gradually uncoiling. "I think it's less about Auckland and more about distance." "Ah," he nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes the most important journey is the one that takes us away from what's familiar." By the 2-month mark, my research was progressing exceptionally well. Our team had made significant advancements in the protocol, attracting attention from medical researchers internationally. I was thriving professionally in a way I never had in Boston, no longer dividing my mental energy between work and family stress. The messages from home continued, filtered through Zoe. My parents had progressed from anger to concern, filing a missing persons report that was quickly dismissed when the police confirmed I had left the country voluntarily. Ashley's wedding had gone forward as planned, though according to Zoe, my absence had become the elephant in the room that guests whispered about. "They've created a narrative," Zoe reported. "They're telling everyone you had a nervous breakdown from work pressure and needed time away. It's their way of explaining your disappearance without examining their role in it." I wasn't surprised. It fit their pattern perfectly, reframing the situation to absolve themselves of responsibility. What did surprise me was how little their narrative affected me now. 3 months ago, I would have been devastated by such mischaracterization. Now, from thousands of miles away, I found I simply didn't care what story they told. "Are you okay?" Zoe asked during one of our rare video calls, studying my face for signs of distress. "I'm better than okay," I answered truthfully. "I'm finding myself again, Zoe. Maybe for the first time, I'm discovering who Natalie is without the weight of being the Thompsons' overlooked daughter." The irony wasn't lost on me. In making myself invisible to my family, I had finally become visible to myself. My research was flourishing, my confidence growing, and even my appearance was changing. I'd cut my hair shorter, adopted a more relaxed style of dress, and the perpetual furrow between my brows had smoothed out. As for James Cooper, our professional relationship was evolving into something more personal. We began spending weekends exploring New Zealand together, his dry British humor and thoughtful perspectives making him the perfect traveling companion. Unlike past relationships that had fizzled under the pressure of my family commitments, this connection was developing in a healthy space, unencumbered by external complications. "You never talk about your family," he observed one evening as we shared dinner at a small coastal restaurant. "There's not much to say," I replied, surprised to find it was increasingly true. The pain was still there, but it was becoming a dull ache rather than the sharp stab it once was. "Everyone has a story," he said gently. "When you're ready to share yours, I'm here to listen. No pressure, no judgment." His patient understanding was yet another confirmation that I'd made the right choice in leaving. Here, halfway around the world, I had found people who valued me for exactly who I was, not who they needed me to be. 6 months into my new life, I stood on the same cliff where I would later view my sister's viral wedding photos, watching the Pacific Ocean crash against the rocks below. My research was thriving, I had genuine friends, and for the first time in memory, I felt at peace. I had disappeared from one life only to become more fully present in another. What I couldn't have anticipated was how my absence would create ripples that would eventually reach all the way from Boston to Auckland, forcing confrontations none of us were prepared for. 8 months after my disappearance, our research team made a breakthrough. Our modified protocol for treating certain autoimmune disorders showed unprecedented success in clinical trials, reducing symptoms by nearly 70% with minimal side effects. The medical community took immediate notice. The Thompson Protocol, as colleagues had begun calling it, was featured in leading medical journals. My name appeared in scientific publications worldwide, with requests for interviews and speaking engagements flooding my institutional email. I accepted selected professional opportunities but declined any that might reveal my specific location. It was Dr. Chen who first alerted me to the unexpected consequence of our success. "Your research is making quite a splash," she said, dropping a medical journal on my desk. "Including back in the United States. Several Boston institutions have expressed interest in collaboration." I stared at the journal cover featuring our research team, my name prominently displayed. For months, I'd been focused on the work itself, not considering how its success might create a trail leading back to me. The scientific community was smaller than most people realized, with international connections and collaborations forming a web that could easily entangle those seeking privacy. That evening, I received an urgent email from Zoe. "Call me immediately," she wrote. "Things are escalating here." When I connected with her via secure video call, her expression was grim. "Your research is everywhere, Nat. Your parents have hired a private investigator to track you down. They're telling everyone they're worried about your mental health, that you need intervention. They've been showing up at my apartment, my workplace. It's getting intense." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "I'm sorry they're harassing you." "What exactly are they saying?" "That's the thing, it's all about them. How worried they are, how they can't understand why you'd abandon your family, how Ashley's wedding was ruined by guests asking about you." Zoe ran a hand through her hair in frustration. "They've created this whole narrative where you had some kind of breakdown from work pressure and need to be rescued. Not once have they acknowledged what they did to drive you away. Have they mentioned what happened at the lake house? Being uninvited from the wedding? Never. According to them, they've been nothing but supportive, and your disappearance was completely unprovoked." She paused. "But here's where it gets complicated. Your story has gone viral." "What?" I straightened in my chair. "Someone, one of the cousins, I think, posted about your absence at Ashley's wedding on social media. It got picked up by one of those family drama accounts. Then when your research started making headlines, people connected the dots. Brilliant scientist disappears after family rejects her is the basic angle. There are Reddit threads, TikTok videos, the works." I sat back, stunned. The privacy I'd so carefully constructed was crumbling, not through my family's efforts, but through the unpredictable nature of social media combined with my professional success. "The wedding still happened, obviously," Zoe continued. "But according to mutual friends, it was overshadowed by your absence. People kept asking where you were. Your parents had to keep explaining, and each explanation made them look worse. The Reynolds family was apparently not impressed by the situation." I felt a strange detachment listening to Zoe's account, as if she were describing characters in a film rather than my actual family. "And Ashley? How did she handle it?" "Not well. She's been posting passive-aggressive things about selfish family members who ruin important moments. The irony is completely lost on her." Zoe leaned closer to the camera. "But here's what you need to know, your department colleagues in Boston have been contacted by journalists. The media is trying to piece together your story. It's only a matter of time before they trace you to Auckland." The implications were immediate and concerning. While I had no regrets about my decision to leave, I had never intended my private family matters to become public fodder. Nor had I wanted my professional achievements overshadowed by family drama. "There's more," Zoe said hesitantly. "Your parents have been showing up at the medical center, demanding information. Security has had to escort them out twice. Dr. Patel has been protective of your privacy, but he's under pressure. And media have been attempting to contact your colleagues in New Zealand." I closed my eyes briefly, processing this new reality. My careful disappearance had evolved into something I never anticipated, a public narrative beyond my control. The next morning, I discovered just how right Zoe had been. 3 interview requests from American medical correspondents had arrived overnight, each making veiled references to my interesting personal story alongside questions about the research. Dr. Chen called me into her office, concern evident in her expression. "We've received several media inquiries about you specifically, Dr. Thompson," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "Not just about the research, but about your situation. I want you to know the Institute fully supports your privacy, but I thought you should be aware." I scanned the media requests, noting the increasingly personal nature of the inquiries. "I appreciate your discretion. This is unexpected. If I may," she said carefully, "sometimes controlling the narrative is better than allowing others to create it for you. Just something to consider." Her words stayed with me as I returned to my lab, where I found James waiting with a troubled expression. "Someone called me asking about you," he said without preamble. "A reporter from Boston. They somehow knew we're close." The invasion felt violating. My family drama was now threatening not only my professional reputation but also the personal connections I'd worked so hard to build in my new life. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, weighing my options. I could continue ignoring the situation, hoping it would eventually die down. I could issue a bland statement addressing only the scientific aspects of my work. Or I could do as Dr. Chen suggested and take control of the narrative. As if on cue, my phone pinged with another email from Zoe. This one contained a video link with the subject line, "You should see this." The clip showed my parents on a local Boston news segment, looking appropriately distressed as they pleaded for information about their troubled daughter who had abandoned her family and career due to work-related stress. My mother dabbed at tearless eyes while my father spoke gravely about their concerns for my mental health. "If anyone has information about Natalie's whereabouts, please contact us," he said directly to the camera. "We just want to know she's safe and get her the help she needs." The carefully constructed fiction made my blood boil. Not once did they mention uninviting me from Ashley's wedding. Not once did they acknowledge years of emotional neglect. Instead, they had rewritten history to cast themselves as concerned parents and me as unstable and ungrateful. A second link showed Ashley giving a tearful interview to a popular podcast about family estrangement, positioning herself as the bewildered sister whose wedding was ruined by my unexplained disappearance. "I just don't understand what I did wrong," she said, her practiced vulnerability on full display. "We were always so close." The blatant rewriting of our history pushed me past my breaking point. For months, I had maintained my privacy, focusing on building my new life rather than dwelling on the past. But now my family was publicly maligning my character and mental health, potentially damaging my professional reputation and new relationships. It was time to reclaim my story. I picked up my phone and called Dr. Cooper, who answered immediately. "James," I said, my voice steady with newfound resolve, "remember when you said you'd listen when I was ready to share my story? I think that time has come." Later that night, I composed a careful email to Dr. Chen, requesting a meeting to discuss how to address the mounting media interest. Then I wrote to Zoe, "They don't get to control this narrative anymore. I'm done being invisible on their terms." The turning point had arrived. After months of silence, I would speak, not to return to my old life, but to protect the new one I had built. The third major shift in my journey was beginning, and this time I would be the one directing its course. Exactly 1 year after I boarded that plane to Auckland, I stood in the Institute's conference room, preparing for my first and only public statement about my disappearance. After careful consideration and consultation with Dr. Chen, I had agreed to an exclusive interview with the prestigious Scientific American rather than a mainstream media outlet. This would allow me to focus primarily on the research while addressing personal matters on my own terms. The past 12 months had transformed me in ways I never anticipated. My research had led to a treatment protocol now in expanded clinical trials, potentially helping thousands of patients with previously untreatable conditions. I had built meaningful friendships and professional relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. And most significantly, I had rediscovered my own worth separate from family validation. "Are you ready for this?" James asked, adjusting his tie nervously. After months of supporting me through the behind-the-scenes turmoil, he had agreed to be present during the interview as moral support. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, smoothing my blazer. "It's time to own my story." The interview was conducted with remarkable professionalism, focusing primarily on the scientific breakthrough our team had achieved. When the conversation inevitably turned to my personal circumstances, I was prepared with a carefully crafted statement. "Yes, I did leave Boston rather suddenly," I acknowledged. "I made a difficult but necessary decision to prioritize my well-being and professional development." The fellowship opportunity in New Zealand represented not just a career advancement but a chance to focus entirely on research that could help thousands of patients worldwide. "I'm proud of what our team has accomplished here." "And the reports about family estrangement?" the journalist asked delicately. "I believe that healthy boundaries are essential for personal growth," I replied evenly. "Sometimes distance, even significant distance, is necessary for that growth. I'd prefer to focus on the positive impact our research is having rather than private family matters." My measured response, neither denying the estrangement nor engaging in public accusations, struck exactly the tone I intended. The resulting article, published 2 weeks later, presented me as a dedicated scientist who had made difficult personal choices in service of important medical research, a far cry from the troubled daughter narrative my family had been promoting. The article's publication created immediate ripples. My inbox filled with messages from colleagues worldwide expressing admiration for both the research and my professional approach to personal challenges. But the most significant response came through Zoe, who forwarded me an email she had received from my family. It was a public apology letter, clearly crafted with professional help, expressing deep regret for any misunderstandings and acknowledging that they may have inadvertently contributed to my decision to leave. The carefully worded text stopped short of admitting specific wrongdoing while attempting to salvage their public image after the Scientific American piece had effectively countered their previous narrative. "They're scrambling," Zoe commented in her accompanying message. "Your dignified approach made their dramatic interviews look manipulative by comparison." They've been getting serious backlash, especially since some extended family members have started contradicting their version of events online. I read the apology letter several times, noting how it focused on their feelings and reputation rather than genuine concern for me. Even in supposed contrition, they remained self-centered. After careful consideration, I crafted a brief response and asked Zoe to deliver it. "I appreciate the acknowledgement. I'm thriving professionally and personally in my new life. I'm no longer available for diminishment, but I wish you well." The short message was more closure than confrontation, a declaration of my new boundaries rather than a continuation of conflict. I had no interest in prolonging the drama. I simply wanted to establish that I was well without them and would no longer tolerate being minimized. 2 days later, I received an unexpected surprise. Zoe had booked a flight to Auckland. "I need to see this new life of yours for myself," she explained over the phone. And honestly, after playing middleman in this family drama for a year, I could use a vacation. Greeting Zoe at the airport felt like worlds colliding, my past and present converging in the form of my oldest friend. As we embraced, I realized she was the one thread from my previous life that I was grateful to maintain. "You look different," she said, studying me as we drove along Auckland's coastline. "Not just the haircut or the clothes. You carry yourself differently." "I feel different," I admitted. "For the first time, I'm just Natalie, not someone's daughter or sister or whatever role I was supposed to play. Just me." Over the next week, I showed Zoe my new world, the research facility where I'd made professional breakthroughs, the coastal paths where I'd found personal peace, the local cafes where I'd built new friendships. She met James and my other colleagues, witnessing firsthand the respect and appreciation I received. "They see you here," she observed over dinner one evening. "Really see you." "That's exactly it," I agreed. After a lifetime of being overlooked, being seen is revolutionary. On Zoe's last night in Auckland, as we shared a bottle of wine on my balcony, she broached the subject I'd been avoiding. Your family has had a genuine reckoning, Nat. The public backlash was significant, but it went deeper than that. People started questioning them, neighbors, friends, even the Reynolds family. For the first time, they've had to face real consequences for how they treated you. I gazed out at the moonlight reflecting on the Pacific. I didn't disappear to punish them, Zoe. I did it to save myself. I know. But sometimes the universe handles justice in its own way. She hesitated before continuing. Ashley reached out to me before I left. She asked me to give you something. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from my sister, not a public statement, but a private communication. Unlike our parents' carefully worded public apology, Ashley's letter was messy, emotional, and surprisingly self-aware. I've been thinking about that day at the lake house, she wrote. When Mom and Dad said it would be better if you weren't at the wedding. I should have defended you. I didn't because I was selfish and jealous. Yes, jealous of your independence, your accomplishments, your strength. It was easier to be the favorite child than to build something meaningful on my own. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging the truth. You deserved better. The letter continued, describing her post-wedding realization that the family dynamic had always been unhealthy, how my absence had forced her to see patterns she'd previously benefited from. She closed not with a request for reconciliation but with respect for my boundaries. Wherever you are, I hope you're finally being valued the way you always should have been here. I folded the letter carefully, unexpected emotion tightening my throat. It wasn't a magical fix for years of hurt, but it was something I never expected, genuine acknowledgement without demands. 2 days after Zoe's departure, I returned to the cliff where my story began. Standing at the edge, looking out over the vast Pacific, I reflected on the journey of the past year. I had disappeared to escape being unseen, only to discover that sometimes vanishing is the only way to truly be found. My phone buzzed with a text from James, asking if I'd like to join him and some colleagues for dinner. In my pocket, Ashley's letter remained, not an invitation back to my old life, but perhaps a first small step toward healing on my own terms, in my own time. I took one last look at the endless horizon before turning toward the city lights. My disappearance had begun as an escape but had transformed into something far more powerful, a reclamation of my own story. In becoming invisible to those who never truly saw me, I had finally become visible to myself. The wind carried away my final whisper to the ocean, sometimes you have to vanish to be found. What would you have done in Natalie's situation? Would you have completely disappeared, or tried another approach? Have you ever had to distance yourself from toxic family dynamics to protect your mental health? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is prioritize your own well-being. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to create boundaries that protect your peace.